The morning air in downtown Little Rock carried a dense, humid weight, the kind that wrapped itself around your skin and made every step feel heavier. But Danielle Hayes moved through it like a soldier on a mission. Years in uniform had taught her how to walk tall, even when the world around her tried to make her small. Her hair, pulled back into neat shoulder-length locks, framed a face stripped of makeup and pretense. She wore no jewelry, just a plain canvas bag slung over one shoulder, her veteran ID clipped proudly to the front, and a water bottle sweating by her side. Today wasn't about making statements. It was about doing her duty. She'd done this before, jury duty, that is. Sacramento, San Antonio, routine, civic responsibility. But this time, something felt off. As she approached the security checkpoint at the Pulaski County Courthouse, she nodded at the older white man in front of her. He didn't nod back. Still, she kept her pace steady, her summons neatly folded in her hand. Then she saw him. Bailiff Curtis Randall. Square jaw. Buzz cut turned silver. Shoulders like he still benched on weekends. The kind of man who looked at you too long, stood just a little too close. His eyes scanned Danielle, not her badge, not her papers, her hair. "You here for something?" he asked, suspicion already curling at the edges of his voice. Danielle smiled calmly, holding out the summons. "Yes, sir. Jury duty. 9 o'clock. He didn't take the paper. Didn't even glance at it. "Ma'am, there's a dress code," he said. "This is a courtroom, not a street corner." The words landed hard. Danielle blinked, thrown for a second. "Excuse me. Hair needs to be neat and professional," he said, gesturing toward a laminated sheet of rules. "Dreadlocks are not appropriate in a courtroom. We can't have distractions. These are locks," she said, keeping her tone even. "And I've worn them through 2 tours in Iraq. This hair has been in more uniformed service than most people in this building. I'm not here to distract anyone. I'm here to serve." Randall didn't budge. "Fix it or step out of line. You're not entering that courtroom like this." A tense silence settled between them. People passed by, the buzz of small conversations, and echoing footsteps forming a muffled background. But right there, in that still pocket between Danielle and this man, time slowed. "I don't carry clippers or a brush," she said. "And I shouldn't have to." The young black woman seated at the security desk glanced up, then quickly looked away. Danielle noticed. So did Randall. "If you refuse," he said, voice lower now, but no less sharp, "I'll report you. Contempt of court is real, Miss Hayes." Her mind lit up with responses, sharp, fiery words ready to leap from her tongue. But the army had taught her restraint. Sometimes survival meant silence. "Can I speak to someone else?" "I am someone else," he snapped. "I'm the one who decides who gets through that door. You want in? Then fix your appearance." Her heart pounded, not with fear, but with rage. The kind that curls hot in your chest and sits like a rock. She knew what would happen if she pushed. She knew how the system worked. "Let me make a call." "No calls past the checkpoint," he said flatly. "Leave, and you're forfeiting your duty. Stay, and you follow protocol." There was nothing in the courthouse rules about hair. She knew it. He knew it. But this wasn't about rules. It was about control. And something in Randall's smug stance told her this wasn't over. Danielle was led to a small back room past security. Cinder block walls. No windows. A single overhead bulb casting a clinical light. She wasn't under arrest. Not exactly. But it didn't feel like she had a choice. Randall stood in the doorway, arms folded. "I'm giving you an option. 15 minutes. You cooperate, you're in." Danielle sat, the hard plastic chair pressing into her back. "Still haven't explained how my hair's a problem. It's not personal. It's decorum. Is that right?" Her voice was dry, tired of the dance. Randall didn't bother arguing. He opened a drawer and pulled out a pair of clippers. The hum of their buzz filled the small room, sounding louder than it should have. He tested them like a mechanic with a tool. Danielle's stomach turned. "You want me to let you cut my hair?" she asked, disbelief rising in her throat. "The court has standards," he replied. "You can't come in looking like that. It's disruptive." "But if a white woman walked in with a messy bun?" He said nothing. Danielle leaned forward, her voice steel. "I've survived sandstorms, bombs, and men who called me worse than what you're thinking. But not one of them tried to take this from me." Randall stepped forward. "You going to comply?" he asked. She stared at the door, the escape just a few feet away. She could leave. Let this place sit in its own shame. But she didn't move. "I'll remember this," she said. "Remember what you want. Sit down." She lowered herself into the chair. Her hands trembled in her lap. She gritted her teeth. "This isn't compliance," she said. "This is survival." Randall didn't respond. Just brought the buzzing clippers to her head. Each swipe through her locks felt like a cut through her spirit. The strands fell like ash to the tile floor. She stared at a spot on the wall. 3 minutes. That's all it took to strip away years of identity. When it was done, he handed her a paper towel like a token of victory. "You're good to go." Danielle rose slowly. She didn't look in a mirror. She didn't need to. She already knew what she'd see, not weakness, but a quiet, aching fury. She walked back through the hall. The young black woman behind the desk looked away again. Danielle said nothing. She handed her bag over, waited in silence, and was sent to Courtroom 2A, her head bare, her spine unbent. The only one who acknowledged her as Danielle entered the courtroom was an older woman, Bailiff Bethany, who gave a polite, if distant, smile before continuing with her duties. Danielle walked stiffly to a seat near the back of the gallery. Her fingers twitched in her lap, uncertain of what to do now that she was here. The room wasn't full yet. A few early jurors were scattered across benches, heads bowed over their phones, murmuring softly to each other. No one looked at her. Not really. She didn't know how long she'd be sitting there before roll call began, but she knew one thing for sure. If today was supposed to be a lesson, Curtis Randall had chosen the wrong woman to teach. Some lessons don't land the way you intend. They ricochet, echo, grow louder with time. And his? His was coming. He just didn't know it yet. The courtroom was still quiet, the kind of quiet that buzzes behind your ears. Danielle's hands were clasped tight in her lap, nails digging crescents into her palms. Her scalp, freshly stripped of its identity, felt bare in a way she couldn't describe. Every breath of circulating courthouse air grazed her skin like a fresh wound. She tried to remind herself, "You belong here. You don't owe anyone an explanation." But the heat rising up the back of her neck wasn't shame, it was fury. Not the kind that explodes, but the simmering, patient kind. The kind that sits under the surface, waiting. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. Just breathe. Inhale. Exhale. Again. Just like her old sergeant used to say before every mission when the nerves took hold. The breathing helped steady her, until a woman 2 rows ahead turned and stared. Just for a moment. But long enough. Her gaze lingered on Danielle's shaved head, then flicked away like nothing had happened. Danielle looked down. Then the side door creaked. Curtis Randall walked in. Not in uniform now, just a gray button-up, coffee in hand, trying to look casual. But Danielle saw the truth. His face relaxed, his body language smooth, like he hadn't just humiliated someone that morning. Their eyes met. Briefly. He looked away. Danielle wanted to stand up. To say something. To speak the truth out loud in front of everyone. But she didn't. Not yet. Because that wasn't how she fought. She didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. 5 minutes passed before a clerk entered. "We're just waiting on the judge, folks," she announced. "She's en route." Got caught behind an accident on I-30. Curtis didn't move. Just stood near the bench like nothing unusual had happened, like he hadn't made a decision that would change everything. Danielle's mind wandered. To heat. To sand. To the sting of sweat in her eyes. To the sound of mortars overhead. Into Monica Traylor. It had been 12 years since they'd last spoken. Monica's laugh drifted back to her, dry and low, always arriving a beat late, especially when the food in the mess tent was at its worst. Monica had been serious when it mattered. No nonsense. The kind of soldier you trusted with your life. Danielle remembered one night clearly, the two of them lying side by side in a foxhole, sharing silence as shells exploded in the distance. That kind of bond doesn't fade. But time and distance do what war couldn't. They separate. Different cities. Different lives. Danielle had heard Monica made it into law. But a judge? That was news. Judges weren't common in their old unit. She never expected to see her again. Certainly not like this. Danielle touched her scalp again. It still didn't feel real. And then the back doors opened. The clerk straightened her papers. Randall stood up straighter. And in walked Judge Monica Traylor. All rise. Danielle stood with the rest, but her breath caught in her throat. There she was, robed in black, curls full and natural, her presence quiet but commanding. She didn't just occupy the bench. She owned it. Monica walked with a steadiness that radiated authority. Danielle could barely breathe. Curtis Randall's expression shifted. He stared at the judge, his face suddenly pale, eyebrows knit together. Not recognition, confusion. You could see it in the twitch of his mouth, the slight retreat of one foot. He was trying to place her. Monica sat, adjusted the microphone, and scanned the courtroom. Her eyes swept the juror box, then the gallery. When she saw Danielle, her entire expression changed. Her mouth parted. Her eyes widened. She looked at the shaved head, the hands folded too tightly. And then, very slowly, her gaze moved to Curtis Randall. She didn't speak. Not yet. We'll begin with a few procedural matters, she said, her voice calm but taut. Juror selection will start in 20 minutes. The gavel tapped once. Light. Deliberate. Danielle sat down. Her pulse raced. Something had shifted in the room. And Curtis Randall felt it too. Monica sat with a rigid elegance, scanning her docket, her lips drawn tight. There was a new energy in the courtroom now, not loud, not obvious, but unmistakable. Something beneath the surface had cracked. Danielle stayed silent in the gallery, her scalp itching, every nerve on edge. Her gaze never left Monica. She watched every motion, every glance. And across the room, Curtis tried to make himself invisible. Gone was the authority, the smug posture. He now stood stiffly near the wall, pretending to review something on a clipboard, avoiding eye contact at all costs. Then Monica looked up. Her eyes found Danielle's. And this time, she didn't look away. Before we proceed, she said, voice unwavering, I need to address something. The clerk looked up, startled. A murmur flickered through the jurors. I noticed a familiar face in the gallery today, Monica continued. Sergeant Danielle Hayes, retired. A fellow soldier I had the honor of serving with overseas. Heads turned. Danielle didn't move. She served with distinction, Monica said, her voice fuller now. 2 deployments. Medals for bravery. And she's one of the reasons I made it back home in one piece. A beat of silence. We haven't spoken in years, she added, her eyes softening, but I know her. I know her strength. Curtis Randall shifted uncomfortably. And yet, Monica's tone changed sharper now, more pointed. When I saw her this morning, I knew something was wrong. Instantly. The room froze. I've known Danielle for over a decade. And never, not once, have I seen her without her locks. It's not just a hairstyle. It's part of her identity, her culture, her dignity. Then, slowly, she turned toward Curtis Randall. Mr. Randall, would you please approach the bench? He hesitated, then walked forward. Each step sounded louder than the last, echoing through the courtroom like hammer blows. He stood before her, trying to appear composed. I understand there was an incident at security this morning, Monica said. Randall cleared his throat. Judge, I was following procedure. We've had complaints about distractions in the courtroom. I asked her to make an adjustment. You asked her, Monica interrupted, her voice now ice, to shave her head. Randall froze. You took clippers to a black woman's hair. A veteran. A juror. And you did it in the name of. Well, better live up to that promise. Monica's voice had dropped to a hush, but in that still courtroom, it carried like thunder. No one moved. No one dared interrupt. This isn't about protocol, she continued, her gaze moving slowly across the room. It's about people. It's about dignity. About not just knowing the law, but remembering why it exists in the first place. She let the silence settle again, let her words breathe. I took this bench not to wear the robe, but to serve under its weight. And if we allow intimidation, discrimination, or silence to take root here, even once, then we are failing that responsibility. You could have heard a pin drop. Danielle sat straighter, no longer clutching herself like she had earlier. She wasn't just a veteran or a juror or a target of bias anymore. She was a reminder, a mirror held up to a system that too often looked away. Monica closed her eyes for half a beat, then opened them again. Her voice was quiet now, but no less sure. I see you, Sergeant Hayes. And I thank you. For your service. For your presence. And for your courage, today and always. Danielle didn't respond with words. She didn't have to. The look in her eyes said everything. Gratitude. Solidarity. And yes, that quiet flicker of vindication. Monica returned to her seat, her robe settling around her like armor once more. The gavel rested in her hand, not as a weapon, but a promise. Let's continue. And so they did. But it was no longer the same courtroom. The rules hadn't changed, but the air had, and everyone knew it. Justice had spoken, and this time, it didn't whisper. Sure, this courthouse belongs to Danielle Hayes. Danielle looked up, her mouth tight as she held back the flood of emotion. You don't need a gavel to make change, Monica continued. Sometimes all it takes is someone refusing to walk away quietly. She paused, letting the silence hang in the room. And before we begin today's case, let me make one thing very clear to everyone listening, whether you're in this room, hearing about it down the hall, or reading about it tomorrow. If you think authority gives you permission to erase someone's identity, you don't belong in this building. You're not protecting the law. You're poisoning it. A few heads nodded, subtle, but real. Monica sat back in her chair. Now, let's proceed. The clerk began calling jurors for voir dire. Danielle didn't move from her seat, but she didn't need to. Everyone saw her now for who she was, for what she'd endured, and for what she'd stood through. Silently, firmly. Back in the hall, Curtis Randall sat in the security office staring down at a form he was forced to sign, temporary administrative leave pending investigation. His face was blank. He'd seen himself as a gatekeeper. But today, the gate slammed shut on him. And even as he walked out, it wasn't about Randall anymore. It was about who would step up next, because silence didn't protect anybody, and it never had. Danielle didn't speak to the media. She didn't post about it. She didn't need a trending hashtag to make her feel seen. What mattered had already happened in that courtroom, in front of strangers, in front of Judge Traylor. She finished her jury duty. Every morning that week, she walked back into the courthouse head held high, bald head uncovered, unapologetic. Nobody dared stop her. Not anymore. The young security clerk, the same one who looked away when it all began, offered her a quiet good morning on day 2. By day 4, they shared a short nod. No big moment, no speech, just small human respect. And sometimes, that's enough to start something better. Word about Randall spread fast. His leave became permanent the following month. An investigation confirmed that what he did wasn't just inappropriate, it was targeted. Bias weaponized under the mask of order. He lost more than his job. His name now carried weight, but not the kind he wanted. Monica Traylor faced pushback, of course. Judges always do when they make waves. There were calls, emails, whispers about overstepping, about getting too personal. But she didn't flinch. She issued a formal recommendation to revise the courthouse's conduct guidelines, specifically banning discrimination against natural hairstyles and requiring racial sensitivity training for all courtroom staff. It passed unanimously. Danielle never asked for recognition. But a month later, she received a letter, handwritten, signed by Judge Traylor herself. Some fights are loud. Some are quiet. Yours was quiet, but it echoed all the way to the bench. Thank you for standing anyway. She kept that letter tucked in the front of her bookshelf, right next to her folded flag and discharge papers. A few months later, Danielle was asked to speak at a veterans panel at a community college in Conway. She almost said no, but something pulled her there. She stood in front of a crowd of mostly young people, some just starting out, some fresh out of the military, a few in baggy hoodies and sneakers. And she told them what happened. She didn't cry. She told the truth. At the end, a young woman with short braids raised her hand and asked, "What made you stay after he cut your hair?" Danielle paused. Then she said, "Because walking away doesn't always keep you whole. Sometimes standing still, quiet, bald, angry, makes them look at themselves. And that's when the real change starts." A hush fell over the room. After the panel, one of the professors walked up to her and said, "You ever thought about teaching?" Danielle just smiled. The thing is, most stories like this, they don't make headlines. They don't get justice in 10 minutes. They fade behind bigger news, louder names. But they matter because they're real. They happen in courthouses and classrooms, in break rooms and barber shops, every single day. And they remind us, bias doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it shows up with clippers in hand, pretending to follow rules. But silence doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you invisible. Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw a fit. She just showed up, stood her ground, and let the truth speak through her pain. And Monica? She did what more people in power need to do. She didn't just see what was wrong, she said it out loud, publicly. That matters. Because when one person speaks up, it gives the next person permission to do the same. If you've ever been made to feel small for just being yourself, don't forget, your story matters. Your presence matters. And your silence is not the price of peace. Speak up, even if your voice shakes. Even if no one's looking. Especially then. Because sometimes, all it takes to shift the whole room is one person refusing to shrink. And if you know someone like Danielle, or someone who's been Danielle, share this story with them. Let them know they're not alone. And if you've ever had power, whether in a classroom, a courtroom, or a company, use it right. Use it to lift, not to crush. Because what you tolerate becomes what you accept. And what you accept becomes who you are.